I would now like to welcome our next guest, Whitley Yates, Director of Diversity and Engagement for the Indiana Republican Party. Whitley, thank you so much for being here. Looking stunning. I'm loving this outfit.
The fashion is foundational.
So we have been talking today all about Black women in politics, and right now you served as the Director of Diversity and Engagement for the Indiana Republican Party for, is it 4 years now?
I'm still there.
Still there, 4 years. And I just want to touch a little bit on the power of Black Republican women, because we often, I know, hear that Black Americans are very loyal to the Democrats, but we know Black voters are not a monolith. And as you were here showcasing to us, as well as Roxy earlier and Kimberly earlier, is that not every Black person out there is a Democrat. So what is the power of Black female Republicans?
That's such a heavy question. And it's heavy because there has been a void of Black women engaging and interacting within the Republican Party. And I think that part of it is by design. And I think the other part is the designation of the voices that were uplifted were not voices that connected to community. So if I can't see myself in what you're saying and how you're behaving, then you cannot advocate for me in a way that is beneficial. Coming into my role, being the only Director of Diversity in any Republican Party in the country, in a time where DEI is frowned upon within the Republican Party, was a feat in and of itself. To layer the intersectionality of being first on top of first in a party that doesn't have many on top stages, in top positions that look like me, layered with my race, and then we'll put the cherry on top of my gender. It makes for a very unique situation because the barriers that exist for all are now heightened because of all of these intersectionalities. So my intentionality in sitting in this role and understanding that the level of publicity, good or bad, the level of vitriol and hate that is going to come towards me, it's going to take a lot for me to continue to swim upstream. When I see people and I hear the conversations being had, when I look at the level of representation of the Roxys, it gives me hope, it gives me fuel to consistently show up in the way that I need to do my job. Because the truth is that when you look at other Black Republican women that have been given a microphone, a lot of them are not representative of a majority of what Black women feel and what we're experiencing. And so I think it's vitally important for Black Republican women to understand how important their voice is so that they can utilize that in the space that they sit in, knowing that they may be the only one there.
You mentioned all of these intersecting identities that you have in this position, and just hearing you talk about it, it just sounds very daunting to be in this role. I think anytime being the first of anything, it has a little bit of that anxiety. But looking out at our audience right now, you know, how would you just walk somebody through being the first Black woman, first anything, and to say you can continue doing that. It might be scary, but keep pushing forward.
So, you know, I'm a very purpose-driven person. So coming into this role, I was like, I don't know if that's for me. I like to be unbought and unbothered. I don't want to put any titles. I don't want to be affiliated or assimilated, but I understood that I needed to be on this side. I understood that I needed to be at these tables because the leaders who were making the choices and decisions hadn't been exposed to the things that I had been exposed to. So I understood that the policies being predicated at the tables that I didn't sit at were going to be as narrow as the people that were sitting at the table. So in order for me to continue to push forward and understand that I have to create a series where other people feel included in places and spaces where we haven't felt before. So I not only have to walk through these doors and blaze these trails for myself, but I have to blaze them for the people that I'm bringing up with me to help them get elected and to help them be civically engaged. So my stamina, I really draw it from understanding my purpose and my place. So when I'm met with adversity, I don't question it because I understand that I'm supposed to be met with adversity. Because just the sheer fact that I'm in this role and in this position, that I walk into rooms and my presence in the rooms create and shake tables without me even speaking. So I'm aware that there is a power in my presence before I profess what is in my head, and how that it really just shifts the power structures, it shifts the conversations, it shifts the perspectives. And so I run a leadership series to get underrepresented minorities engaged and involved in the Republican Party. I've been doing it now for 4 years in Indiana, and it's the only one of its kind on the Republican side in all 50 states. I sit here as someone who cultivated that out of wanting to see what we didn't already have, and to allow people to know not only that we're not monolithic, but that we can be the types of leaders that you're proud of. That we're not symbols of leadership, but we're substantive in our positions. That we're not selling out our community to assimilate to a majority culture, which you see a lot of, specifically on the right. And so in cultivating this series, in finding people who understood that if politics is a game of chess and you have to protect the king is not a person, it's not yourself, it is the community in which you come from and that you represent. So how you're showing up for that community and how you move the pieces, even the ones that aren't on your side, how you engage and interact and create strategies of success is all for one goal, and it is to protect and to elevate that community. And so I sit here on this stage after running this series and people telling me on both sides that I wasn't going to be successful, that nobody wants to not only identify as conservative or Republican, but they definitely don't want to be affiliated or run for office. I sit here as someone that has a successful nationally lauded program where we have been able to elect the first Black Republican president in the history of Indiana. And it's because I understood the mission and I didn't let the barriers be a distraction. And I think someone said it before, but the best person to obliterate the barrier is the person who met it. And so as I'm forging the way for those behind me and able to also sit here and say that we got the first Black woman elected in the history of Fishers on the council. She's actually the first Black person ever elected in the history of Fishers in Hamilton County, one of the most wealthiest counties in Indiana. It is because I understood my assignment, I stayed focused on my purpose, and I also brought other people with me to continue the work.
You said something that really struck me, which was that the idea of for Black Republicans, you're selling out to your community, and that is something that we hear often. Do you think that we are focusing too much on Black voters or Black leaders? On where are you identifying right now, and before we're able to decide if we can trust you? Like, do you think we do that with other leaders, or are we just doing it with Black folks, and especially with Black women?
Now, Cheyanne. Ooh, so
I'm putting her on the spot, y'all.
So I'm gonna be honest. Yes, it is heavier on the right. And the reason why it's heavier on the right is because the mistrust we talked about earlier. It's because the lack of seeing people that look like yourself on that side. More importantly, that compounded with the rhetoric that also feels against you. It feels abrasive, it feels like sandpaper. So there is a heavier burden to be. And I say that to say that a lot of Black women Republicans actually have to prepare to come out and tell people how they feel, because we don't necessarily have the luxury of being independent in our political ideology. We actually have to prepare to explain why we think and why we feel and why we align, because we don't necessarily have the freedom to go against what is popular and common. And to say that on the other side, there isn't that, they don't have that level to where they have to prove who they are. I would say that on one side, I can see a lot of people who look like me, and I don't necessarily see our communities getting better. On the other side, I can say that there may not be a lot of people who look like me, and I can't necessarily see our communities getting better. And so I think the question is not about whether or not we should be looking for representation through our race and through our gender, but it is the resonance and not symbols of leadership, but substantive leaders that create policies that progress our communities. And so if I have someone that looks like me that's not progressing my community, how is that representative of me? On the flip side, if I don't have anyone that looks like me and my community's not being progressed, then I know that I'm not represented. And so it's almost a double entendre. I think that there should be intentionality placed on having diverse voices at the table. And I also believe that there should be strong intentionality placed on having substantive leaders at the table. And that substance comes from how they're able to progress their communities through policies that are impactful.
I think about your series that you mentioned, the Indiana Republican Diversity Leadership Series. Can you talk a little bit more about that series? But also, I'm curious, how do you see the work that you're doing with this series translating to be nationwide?
You know, when I think about the work that I've done in Indiana and the support that I've received, I tell people, like, some of my biggest haters when I began are my biggest supporters now. Some of the people who looked at my face and told me I wouldn't be successful have given me thousands of dollars to support the success that we've had. And so I'm very thankful for the journey that I'm on. As I sit here today, there's a woman who's running for Congress in this audience who reached out to me through LinkedIn. And it is important for me to understand that the work that I'm doing is not siloed to a state. That the representation that we're creating does not reside within the walls of Indiana. That having Roxy come and speak, and she was our keynote speaker for our graduation, so that our participants can see leadership in action, is so important. I've spoken with 4 other states that are interested in carrying on this work, and it is my hope that I am able to have seeds in multiple states so that we have representation on all sides. And that you know that when I walk in that room and when I sit at that table, that I'm not gonna say something that's gonna be negative against our community. That you can trust that I'm community-centered, and when presented, in politics this happens, when presented with opportunities to propel self or community, that I choose community every time. In the face of what may look appealing or maybe appetizing for my own personal worth, for my own personal gain, that I understand that it's a larger picture. And I think sometimes, specifically with Black people, we're just so glad to get an opportunity to get in the room. Like, I'm just glad I got in the room. I'm just glad I got my foot in the door. Not understanding that you were positioned for a time such as this, not just to be in the room, but to use your voice and to advocate at those tables. To say, that's not right. Absolutely not. We haven't eradicated abject poverty in this nation or in this state. Or to say, absolutely not. I'm a Black woman and I'm afraid to bear a child in this country because that maternal mortality rate is so low. To say that I'm not listened to by doctors and I'm not believed. Like, there is a unique perspective that you bring. So don't just be happy to be in the room. Utilize your voice to create the change necessary. And so, you know, I would love to have those seeds and plant those seeds everywhere. I would love to continue to increase civic engagement and involvement, specifically within the Republican side, because we have so much work to do. And I believe that this is a unique time where if we stay focused on policy and how policy impacts people, then we will progress not only our states, but this country.
Mm-hmm. And Whitley, I have one last quick question for you, but maybe the hardest question. As we heard one of our student audience members say earlier, is that we are in such a polarizing political time right now. I think that we would all be lying to ourselves if we said that we weren't. With that in mind, what keeps you going as you're doing this work?
In a polarizing time that we are in, what keeps it, you know, that's interesting. So I look at national politics and everything that's happening. I mean, it's not even just politics now, it's the culture, right? Politics is downstream from the culture. The culture is polarizing. Like, I'm on Black Twitter each and every day because I live there. And I'm watching, like, there's, you know, American-born Black people versus Black immigrants. There is women versus men. There has been an increase in the polarization of people and almost tribalism in engaging. When I see it in the political sphere, I think that we have become reminiscent of what drives and fuels our society. So our society now commodifies attention, right? Attention is the new commodity, and we're exchanging in it daily. It is a currency that we hadn't seen before, and Gen Z, you know, has never been without it. And so with all of that happening, our politics have become entertaining, a performance, if you will, where you have people who are insiders supposed to be producing policy, pretending and performing about what's happening and what's going wrong, but you are elected in this position to fix and change the things that you're telling us is wrong. So you have a lot of performative leadership. And so as I'm watching all of this, people want to be entertained. They want someone to love, they want someone to hate, they want someone to root for. And so it's really easy to get swept and caught up in the story of the day, who said what, who's doing all of these things. And I look at them, honestly, specifically like federal politics, as like the sun. It's on all the news stations, it's on all the news cycles. You can see it, you go outside, you can feel the sun on you, although I cannot feel it today, but I'm hopeful DC will show me better weather. But a lot of times it's focusing on the politics in your hometown. It's that local level, that state level, that governor, who is your Secretary of State. And those politics and looking at how you engage on that level, that's like gravity. Is your trash getting picked up? Are your street lights on? What do your neighborhoods look like? How much blight is happening? And so we have a tendency as a nation and a society to focus on the sun. And a lot of times we don't necessarily remember gravity. And so I want to implore all of the young people watching, do not be distracted with the tribalism and the polarization. There are going to be political personalities that pop up. You're going to love some, you're going to hate some, you're going to root for others. Understand that it is the policies predicated that will live on. As politics is a pendulum of power that swings back and forth in both directions. But these policies that they create, these laws that they sign, live on forever. From 1865, when we were freed, and beyond. Those laws are still on the books. So whether or not the person that put them in place is still in power, that personality is long gone and not here, but understanding that what they penned still has purpose today. We've got to focus our priorities on the policies predicated and not be caught up in the performance of political personalities, because it's not necessarily politically profitable for us as a people and as a society to get caught up in those personalities.
Absolutely. I want to give a huge thank you to Whitley Yates for being here today, for flying from Indiana to come talk with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Come here, I didn't even
I
get to say
know.
hi to you today.
And I brought my daughter so she can see Black women leading.
Oh, yay!